Hey, we're looking at the Yeedi Vac Station today, a 3-in-1 self-emptying robot vacuum and mop system that has been keeping my floors cleaned for the past month. As part of an extended trip to Syracuse, New York, I've been settling into this temporary cabin-esque rental. I do miss my big studio at home, but this place is at least cozy and most importantly warm, considering it's about -5 degrees out today. But something that I've grown really accustomed to back home, aside from the better weather, was all my perfectly set up home automation. Funny enough, and part of me hates to admit it, but that also extends to automated cleaning. Now generally I wouldn't be bothered to actually set up a robot vacuum for a rental. The fact that this was a longer than usual trip, and the place was getting a lot dirtier, a lot faster because of all the salt and sand from the icy roads, as well as just being in an older place with lots of carpets and odd pieces of furniture and decor that were prone to trapping in dust. Even after just a few days here, my allergies were starting to kick up and I realized this was going to be a tough trip unless I did something about it, which brings me to the Yeedi and why I chose it. Now there's something about a robot vacuum that, when they work well, you can basically set them and forget them and they'll handle the rest. Between the reviews I've made on this channel as well as with makeuseof.com, I've owned and tested out a number of robot vacuums. The 𝗟𝗶𝗵𝗀𝘀, which I tested out last, was a workhorse, and especially if you prioritize mopping and have predominantly hardwood floors, it's a good choice. Now it's about twice the price as the Yeedi that we're looking at today and also doesn't have the function of self-emptying its waste bin. Now, in my experience, if you're trying to use a vacuum like that with mixed surfaces including hardwood floors and carpets, you can't really get the most use out of it just because, again, you have to do a lot of switching over between the mop settings and then switching back to the vacuum settings. That didn't really make too much sense, so I was actually starting to prefer the functionality of having a vacuum that could empty its waste bin, again, over having those advanced mopping features. The recent theme that I've been seeing with most of the vacuums that have been coming out lately, provided that they're the same suction strength, is that they're all pretty similar in terms of how well they can actually clean. There are still a couple key areas that make some models stand out, aside from price. And depending on your floor layout, there are some models that are going to be a better choice. I like the all-white design and the non-glassy plastic choice with the Yeedi. Some vacuums are glossy and at first sight might look a little bit more premium, but they usually end up being a fingerprint and dust magnet over time. The base conceals the wires from the back and it has a cleaning ramp on the front, which in theory is supposed to knock off some of the larger pieces of debris after it's done cleaning and it returns back to the dock. I think one of the bigger reasons for choosing a certain vacuum style over another, and oddly it's not mentioned in any marketing material at all, is actually its design and specifically the height of the vacuum itself. Some vacuums like the 𝗟𝗶𝗵𝗀𝘀 I recently reviewed have a LiDAR navigation system at the top. It kind of makes it look like a submarine and it looks cool. On paper, it's supposed to make the vacuum a little bit smarter with its mapping and obstacle avoidance. In reality, it sort of does, but it depends on your use cases and the types of furniture you have around. But still, that might seem like a con by not having that additional LiDAR sensor. But in turn, it means that you don't have this half-inch height added to the vacuum. So, if you have tighter clearances underneath your furniture, say a couch or a dresser, the Yeedi is actually more easily able to clear it compared to if it had that LiDAR system. This house has several tight areas where the vacuum is able to barely clear it, and again, if it had that system, it wouldn't be able to go underneath it at all. The Yeedi has 3 levels of suction power: 600, 1500, and 3000. Many competing models at this price point that have self-emptying features usually top off at about 2500 or 2700. That said, there are a few options that claim to have 3000 as their max suction strength. It has carpet boost detection, so when it moves from wood or other hard surfaces to carpet, it can actually automatically increase its suction strength to get the best clean. There's a stark difference on this carpet once the Yeedi went over it. That said, this is still just a robot vacuum, so if you need to do deeper cleans, you will need a dedicated vacuum to do so. But if you keep these vacuums running on a more regular schedule, there's less of a need to do those deeper cleans as often, so that does help out. The vacuum does a thorough job of getting into corners, even with a lot of obstacles in the area. Sometimes maybe a little bit too much though. There were a couple examples where the vacuum kept going around this chair leg, and I think that might be attributed to it being in a darker area that perhaps it wasn't too sure where it was going, so it just kept kind of going in a circle until it found its way out. Going back to the lack of a LiDAR system, perhaps that might help in a situation like this. The vacuum can cross obstacles up to 9 millimeters tall. In one example with the living room table, it was surprisingly crossed over its feet with little problem. Edges as well are moved across very easily. It can even clean along them very well. Surprisingly though, and something that I expected would be relatively easy transition for it, crossing the threshold between the living room provided some problems for the vacuum. Although it looks simple, it caused the vacuum to hang off the edge just enough that the wheels were lifted off and it couldn't move forward. This was an example where I had to give the vacuum a tab for my foot in order for it to continue cleaning. Its internal dustbin is 450 milliliters large, which is about the average size for this category. The dock itself has a waste bag that's 2.5 liters big, which should keep the vacuum running smoothly for about a month to a month and a half. This of course will depend on how large your floors are as well as the frequency of those cleaning cycles. The suction of the waste bin does a surprisingly good job. So long as you didn't suck up large pieces of debris in the vacuum, it does a good job of sucking everything out of the vacuum bin. The Yeedi has one of the larger battery sizes in this category at 5200 milliamps. It has a claimed runtime of about 200 minutes in eco mode. You can expect that to drop quite a bit if you have the suction strength turned up or you have 𝗚𝗏𝗵𝗵𝗀𝘀 enabled. But with that, it's still on the higher end of working time. If it runs low on battery during the clean routine, you can set it to return to base, charge enough, and continue the clean afterwards. That's an option in its app, which is pretty simple to use and set up. It doesn't have as many advanced options compared to, say, the 𝗔𝗰𝗵𝗀𝘀, but all the essential things that you really would want are there. After you do your initial pairing and setup, you'll be given a quick overview for its functions. You can set its cleaning routine to certain days and times each week. And of course, you can set the vacuum strength and its mopping wetness too. The mapping options are a little bit limited though, in my opinion. It predetermines what it thinks are different rooms, which you can then label. However, you can't change or add any custom areas. In my case, I wanted to differentiate between the living room and the kitchen and separate those two. So say for example, I only needed to clean up the living room. I could set it to just clean that area, return to the dock, but it doesn't have the ability to, again, set a custom zone like that. You do have the option to set virtual boundaries, however, if for example you didn't want the vacuum to clean a specific area or you wanted to prevent the vacuum from mopping parts of those floors. Speaking of mopping, this is also another unique aspect of the vacuum. Not because of how well it mops necessarily, because it's pretty average for a robot vacuum. I mean, they're decent for lighter spills and helping give a little extra shine to your floors, but don't expect this to replace a dedicated mop if you have a more intense spill. Instead, what I like about it is its integrated 240 milliliter mop tank. Compared to some models which either just have a mop pad attached at the bottom, which is really just more for dusting, or others which have smaller tanks, the Yeedi can actually go a few days without needing to be refilled with water each time. Because of its carpet detection, the vacuum will automatically avoid carpeted areas when the mop is attached. It can still get some of those edges of the carpets cleaned without actually touching it with this mop pad. This is especially good for areas that are mostly hard floors, but they just have a small little bit of section with carpet. Before wrapping up, there are a couple quirks that I want to share. First is that it can struggle to find its way back to the dock. Sometimes it does a relatively good job and heads right back after it's done the clean.
Please help and manually move to the charging dock.
But other times it'll fixate on a certain area. Even though it's less than 8 feet away from the dock, it's for whatever reason deciding that it just wants to circle in that one area, and then it'll eventually give up and you have to manually take it and put it back to the dock in order to charge. And it's especially odd though because in the app itself, you can see the location of the dock, you can see the location of the vacuum, you can see the vacuum moving around in the app in real time. So it knows theoretically where the dock is, but again, for some reason, it just struggles to make its way back to the dock. I'm not entirely sure why this is an issue, but it's not exclusive to the Yeedi. It's been basically seen in every other vacuum that I've reviewed in the past. The last quirk, and I don't think I have a video clip to share as an example, is that the vacuum in the dock itself will randomly turn on for half a second to a second and just startle you. Nothing is near or has touched the vacuum, and oftentimes the vacuum hasn't even run all that day, so there's nothing in its waste bin that it should consider needing to clean up. So not sure why that's happening. It might just be a software bug, so hopefully that does get updated. So those are the main reasons I'm using the Yeedi Station Vac and some of the main features that it has, some of the main advantages it has over its competition, even ones at a similar price point. As with all my other robot vacuum experiences, each new iteration does get a little bit better and gets us a little bit closer to fully automated cleaning. Thanks for checking out this review. If you have any questions about the vacuum, you can let me know down below and I'll help you out there. Until the next one, I'll catch you later.